Hi, everybody. We are back with our final look at our Bill of Rights amendments. What we're going to do is we're going to take a minute to unload a lot of the content from our last video, our last lesson, before we pick up and we finish off the latter half of the Bill of Rights. So our last video, we only focused on the Fifth Amendment because the Fifth Amendment has so much packed into there, and it's a constant struggle when you're looking at legality and constitutionality. It's a very current contemporary issue that continues to be revisited often in many different court cases. We have these layouts of what individuals have, rights that they have when they're being convicted of a crime or if they're being arrested. And we call those the Miranda rights, as a callback to the Miranda v. Arizona case, that you have the right to know what, number one, you're being charged with. Two, you have the right of knowledge of self-incrimination. And three, the other big piece is you have the right to remain silent from freedom of self-incrimination, and you have the right to an attorney, so that you're freely open to know about what these rights are, and you have the right to use them or forego them. And it kind of lays out the legality of interrogations moving forward. From there, we talk about the actual court case system and the premise of what double jeopardy is. And double jeopardy is not just that thing on a TV show. Double jeopardy is the process where if you are found innocent of a crime by a grand jury, then you cannot be taken back to trial for that one crime, right? You cannot constantly be taken to trial and over again for the same offense. Now, that doesn't mean if you get off with murder or theft, then you can steal or kill whoever you want for the rest of your life. In that one account, in that one case, that you cannot be continuously taken back once you have been proved innocent by a grand jury. Now, the key part of that phrase is a grand jury. What is a grand jury? It is a group of your peers, a group of fellow citizens decide what happens. And this is a huge, unique part of our democracy. It's not just one person who's the judge, jury, and executioner. The judge presides over the court case in a criminal hearing. And they make sure all the rules are being followed, and if all evidence is admissible in the court or not. And then it's up to the jury to decide guilt or innocence. And then after that is determined, if that is determined, then it is up to the judge to determine what any form of punishment should happen going forward. So it's this system that we have to sort of like our federal government, where powers are separated, and especially in something as severe and critical as a legal or court system or justice system, that we do separate that power as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick review of what we've done so far. We've done numbers 1 through 5 in terms of the first 10 amendments, which makes up the Bill of Rights. And so we looked at number 1, which are the 5 freedoms: the freedom of religion, the freedom of speech, the freedom of press, the freedom of assembly, and the freedom of petition. Now, all 5 of these things are big on individual liberty, and you'll see that trend all throughout the Bill of Rights. But the big piece is all of these are a callback to the American Revolution, or the early years of the American Republic pre-Constitution. And these are things that we find, according to our founding fathers, are so incredibly important: protection of the rights of the individuals. And that is what the Bill of Rights is outlined to do, such as the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, right? The colonial militias, or the Quartering Act, called out in Amendment number 3, no quartering in times of peace without consent. We also have the Fourth Amendment, that there are no unreasonable searches and seizures that are granted. A search warrant is needed to search and take private property if it's connected to a criminal case, to protect you from these writs of assistance that we saw in the American Revolution by the British government, which were basically unlimited search warrants at any given time. We also have the Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment is jam-packed. We saw the protection of the right to a trial by jury, a grand jury of your peers. The freedom from self-incrimination. We hear that kind of brought up when people say, "I plead the Fifth." The freedom from double jeopardy, that after you're proven innocent, you cannot be taken back to court for that exact same crime. And the due process of law as well, which is basically the overarching theme here. And the only other thing out there that a lot of people usually forget about is the presence of eminent domain, that your private property cannot be stripped from you unless it is for two things. One, it is for public use by the government, and two, the government must compensate you for that loss of property. All of these things that we see throughout, usually when we're referring to the idea of self incrimination and the due process of law, we refer to as the Miranda rights, but it actually connects to the Sixth Amendment, which we're going to start with today. So the Sixth Amendment has a lot of different things in it as well, and 5 and 6 are really, really jam-packed, and they work really well together, so we see a lot of crossover in these issues. A little bit from each you'll see form up what we know as the Miranda rights today. For example, in the Sixth Amendment, you have the right that if you are accused of a crime, that you have the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury. So protecting you from a biased jury, there are systems set in place that lawyers get to go through and eliminate any jurors that they feel have implicit bias against their client or against their case, and that you have the right to a speedy trial, that they can't just drag this on until you sort of give up or you run out of money, that you can't fight it anymore. It must also be within the state or district where you committed the crime. So if you commit the crime, a crime in Texas, a capital crime in Texas, then you're going to be tried in Texas. You're not going to be tried up in Rhode Island, right? You're going to be tried where this happened, and that is where the jury will come from. You are also to be informed of the nature and the causes of the crime. So you can't just be held on trial and you have no idea why you're there. You must be told what you are being held for and what you're being accused of. Third, you also have the right to be confronted with the witnesses against you, that these testimonies will not be held in secret, that they are going to go on this witness stand, that you have the right to hear these charges against you, these cases against you. That there is a process for obtaining witnesses in your favor. So not only is the prosecution allowed to provide witnesses to try to prove their case, but you have the right as well to provide witnesses to prove your innocence. And lastly, probably the biggest piece of the Sixth Amendment is the right to counsel, the assistance of counsel for your defense. So basically, the right to an attorney, the right to a lawyer. If you should choose now, you can forego that. You can represent yourself, but most individuals, because of the intricacies of the legal system, most intelligent individuals will choose to get represented by legal counsel. The Seventh Amendment gives us things outlined by non-criminal cases. So the Sixth Amendment especially deals with criminal cases. This is like murder, high capital crimes. However, those aren't the only types of crimes around. There are also suits of what they call common law, where the value in controversy shall exceed $20. The right of the trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. So there are lesser crimes that you can still have a trial by jury for, but for the most part, we're talking about things of petty crimes or civil lawsuits, the things you may see on like Judge Judy, where it's issues between other people. It's usually about compensation for money, and there are these systems where you can have the right by trial by jury if the warrant allows it, but a lot of times that will just be heard by a judge. The Eighth Amendment. The Eighth Amendment says excessive bail shall not be required, or excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. So creating a sort of black and white system for the legal process, so that you can't be held for millions and millions of dollars of bail for something very, very minor, nor will you be inflicted upon extreme consequences, that there is some sort of rule and law and order. Now, bail is a price of that is put on you for violating a crime, that you can pay that money in order to kind of have your freedom leading up unto a trial. The more severe the case, the more severe the bail price. Now, some people will come and pay for that. Some people will try to avoid paying for that. And all of these processes that are put out by the Eighth Amendment are to protect, on both ends of the spectrum, unreasonable expectations put on the individual citizen. So for example, if you get caught stealing a candy bar, you're not going to get, in this case, 22 years in jail. You're not going to get the death sentence for that. There is a system of structure for what type of crimes qualify for what type of punishments. Now, when we're talking about cruel and unusual punishment, this brings up a really modern debate about the death penalty, about where is it legal, where is it illegal, and that varies by state to state, and there's a state-by-state interpretation. For some people, they view as all forms of execution, all forms of the death penalty as a violation of the Eighth Amendment, while other states allow it. For example, we're going to look at our state, Rhode Island, the death penalty. Rhode Island used to have the death penalty. There was a man by the name of John Gordon. He was an Irish immigrant. He was convicted on murder charges, and you have to look, when you go back to the 1800s, there are many different cases of immigrants being targeted, and it was different groups being targeted at different times. In the mid 1800s, the Irish were kind of public enemy number one in terms of immigrants, and that shift has changed over time to different groups, but they were definitely the number one targeted immigrant group in the United States. The judge allows a lot of sketchy witnesses to testify, and ultimately he's found guilty and sentenced to death. In 1845, he is the last person to be executed by the state of Rhode Island because later, ultimately, they figured out that Gordon was wrongfully convicted, that they found evidence that proved his innocence, that it was an improper trial. And a lot of Rhode Islanders never wanted that to happen again, and so they outlawed it and never reinstated it. And there's many other states that have similar stories. But there are states that have still allowed it, and many states that do still allow it. One of the most common ways that it's allowed is lethal injection. Like I said, it's one of the most common ones. And it goes through various levels, various different states, but it's not the only form of execution that's allowed in the United States, forms of the death penalty. There are some that view this as more humane, the humane way to go, and that this is not cruel and unusual punishment because it removes pain, and there are debates about that, about the sciences and the claims behind that, and then also the legality of it, especially on other forms outside lethal injection, like these forms of execution. Now, these are all allowed, however, they are much more extreme. Now, some of them continually be taken off the book, but these things are certainly still allowed. There's electrocution, the electric chair. Lethal gas is still technically legal in some states by the letter of the law, along with firing squads or hanging. Now, those last three most definitely are not used. The electric chair, electrocution is still allowed in many different states, but lethal injection is by far the most common form of current death penalty ways of it being given. But this whole idea of what constitutes as cruel and unusual punishment is fluid by the time period, and also fluid from place to place. So when we talked about in the Sixth Amendment not that long ago, that it depends on the place that you commit the crime, that you could commit the same crime but in different states. So if you commit the crime in Texas down here, right? Say you commit this crime right here, that you could face the death penalty, but if you are right to the left here in New Mexico and you commit the exact same crime, you will not be up for the death penalty like you would be in Texas. And so people have brought up the questioning legality of those rules. However, those are the rules that we have right now. It's a state-by-state basis because the federal government has not come down, and I don't think will come down ever on this issue. They leave it up to the individual states. Lastly, we have the Ninth and 10th Amendments, and I've grouped them together like this because they deal with the same general issue. When crafting the Bill of Rights that the Anti-Federalists wanted, these amendments actually extended further than just 10, but they were chopped down. The idea was these are explicit things that are going to protect the rights of individuals, but they realized they couldn't think of every possible conceivable scenario, so they also included the 9th and 10th Amendments to fill in those caveats. The 9th Amendment, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So there are certain rights of citizens that are not explicitly listed in the Bill of Rights and in the U.S. Constitution, and it's basically just acknowledging that not everything can possibly be listed. So you can't put everything on paper, but you're not going to allow in the future for these rights to really be restricted upon the people. And then the 10th Amendment deals with the relationship between the federal government and the state governments, rather than the 9th being the relationship between the federal government and the individual people. On the 10th Amendment, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution or prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So if it's not explicitly given to the federal government, all of the other power is given to the state government. So again, it's something that's putting a restriction on central federal power in a way that will convince enough anti-federalist states to actually sign this new constitution. Both of these basically were just acknowledging that not everything can be listed, and there will be new problems in new decades and new eras. And this is one of the things that allows or makes for the U.S. Constitution to be so special. It's a fluid document that acknowledges its flaws, which allows itself to be changed and adapted in future decades, which makes it such a long-lasting document. In short, when you're looking at the 9th and 10th Amendments, which may seem much more vague in big pictures, what it comes down to is the federal government can only use the powers given to it by the Constitution. And if the Constitution does not say that, then it belongs to either the states and or the people. So again, we're looking at this relationship of when it was crafted. The context is by anti-federalists, very skeptical of strong central government just a decade or so after ending the American Revolution. And so all of the amendments in the Bill of Rights are outlined and aimed at protecting the rights of individual citizens and the powers of the states. So just in short recap of everything we've been doing over the past couple of videos, we're going to look at the Bill of Rights one more time in this cute little card we have here, right? We're looking from amendments 1 through 10, and notice how each one of these deals with an individual's rights or is present in either the American Revolution or the era under the Articles of Confederation, right? 1 through 8 will definitely deal with kind of the American Revolution, individual liberty, and 9 and 10 referring or call back to the Articles of Confederation days or ratification to the new U.S. Constitution. So the 5 freedoms are protected under Amendment number 1, freedom of speech, religion, press, assembly, and petition. Amendment number 2, the right to bear arms. Why? In case the government goes bad and we need to fight back again, just like in the American Revolution. Number 3, freedom from quartering of soldiers during times of peace without consent, or even in times of war without legal congressional action, calling back to the days of the Quartering Act. The 4th Amendment protects you from illegal arrests and searches and seizures. The 5th Amendment, the rights of an individual accused of a crime. The 6th Amendment, the rights of people on trial for crimes, criminal court cases. The 7th Amendment, jury trials are protected for those individuals even in civil cases. The 8th Amendment, limitations on bail and punishment, making sure it is not too excessive, cruel, or unusual. The 9th Amendment, any power not outlined in the Constitution or protected in the Constitution, that there will be future rights kept by the people even if they are not listed. And lastly, the 10th Amendment, powers kept by the states are basically anything that's not explicitly given to the federal government must be reserved for the states or the people. So each one of these has a specific purpose. Each one of them has an application and focus and why our country has been able to succeed for so long under this one document that's able to be amended. And these first 10 amendments are so crucial to the foundation of our story moving forward. If you have any questions about them, feel free to drop a comment in the section down below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Take care.